Science fiction's speculative nature allows it to tackle futuristic hypothetical concepts that could never take place in the real world. As such, when the genre crosses over with horror, the on-screen results are endlessly horrifying. The unfortunate nominees here would take death 1,000 times over if it meant an escape from the nightmarish destiny their respective film bestows upon them. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 more sci-fi horror movie fates worse than death. Number 10. Trapped in the Mirror World in Mirrors. Panned by critics and audiences alike, Kiefer Sutherland's Mirrors is an unmitigated disaster of a horror film. Listless performances and a comically nonsensical plot mean that this is a movie-going experience that should be avoided at all costs. With that being said, the 2008 sci-fi horror does possess one of the nastier fates in recent memory. The demon terrorizing Sutherland's Ben Carson and his family within the film inhabits the mirror dimension, a mirrored version of reality accessible through reflected surfaces. Sutherland's character collapses a building on himself and supporting character Anna in the climactic sequence after she is possessed by said demon. Mirror's final twist comes when Ben realizes nobody can see him after having arduously dragged himself from the rubble. Sutherland's befuddled character suddenly registers that everything is reflected when he notices a name tag written backwards, and the horrifying pieces finally fall into place. Ben died when the building came crashing down and is now trapped alone in the mirror dimension, doomed to forever observe the world without being able to interact with it. The sickening concept of such an endless state of purgatory is an infinitely more harrowing notion than that of a swift demise. Number 9. Lobotomized and returned to the Cube in Cube Zero. The Kafkaesque Cube franchise has always received a generally positive reception from horror audiences. The darkly dystopian universe isn't the best creation that horror has to offer, but always results in a thrilling cinematic experience. As such, fans are willing to overlook some of the shakier CGI and more nonsensical plotlines in a trilogy that has garnered cult classic status. Everybody knows the drill in the Cube by now. Anyone unfortunate enough to find themselves trapped in this appalling landscape has to navigate some form of sadistic booby trap to move to the next room. The trilogy's third installment, Cube Zero, sees Eric, a technician in the facility, enter the Cube to rescue a test subject after realizing that participation in the twisted game is involuntary. Tragically, all Eric's good Samaritan nature does is buy him a fate that would make Prometheus wince. While he succeeds in helping the test subject escape the facility, he is unable to avoid being captured in the process. The sinister powers that run the facility reveal that Eric actually agreed to become a test subject years ago, before lobotomizing him and returning him to the Cube. Number 8. Cannibalized while still alive in the Platform. Set in an enormous concrete tower, Spanish sci-fi horror The Platform is a dystopian triumph. An enormous banquet of food descends on a platform every day, stopping for a brief amount of time on every level, each of which houses 2 residents. Accordingly, those on the higher levels get the pick of the grub, while those below are left to pray that some food remains by the time the feast reaches them. The residents are randomly swapped between the floors every month, waking up on a different floor with no warning. Protagonist Goreng soon discovers why being sent to the lower levels is a fate worse than death. Being faced with starvation brings out the darkest traits in people, highlighting the depraved depths that some will go to in order to survive. One might get lucky and be quickly killed in their sleep, but Goreng is thrust headfirst into the worst-case lower level scenario. Following their reassignment to level 171, Goreng awakes to find himself tied to his bed by cellmate Trimagasi. The twisted old man plans to use him as a human smorgasbord to sustain them both, eating carefully rationed strips of Goreng's flesh until they are hopefully restored to a higher level. While Goreng is eventually saved, this shudder-worthy fate would have been infinitely worse than a quick knife in the heart. Number 7. Becoming a prawn in District 9. James Cameron had a bad year at the Academy Awards in 2009. Not only was Avatar upstaged in terms of dramatic quality by The Hurt Locker, the legendary director arguably didn't even produce the best sci-fi-centric picture of the year. That prestigious honour went to Neil Blomkamp's triumphant masterpiece District 9. Blowing modest expectations out of the water, the film was a critical and commercial smash hit. Blomkamp's offering depicts an alternate version of reality, one in which extraterrestrials landed on Earth. These visitors from outer space are shunned in a depressingly morbid parallel of the real-life migration crisis. Contemptuously dubbed prawns, the aliens are treated in barbarically subhuman fashion and segregated to an enormous sprawling shantytown, the film's titular District 9. Under such a ruthless status quo, it is not an exaggeration to suggest that becoming a prawn is a fate far worse than death. Regrettably for protagonist Vicus, this is exactly the situation he finds himself in after becoming exposed to an alien liquid. The mild-mannered employee from the Department of Alien Affairs soon discovers how quickly human beings will turn on their own kind, as he is mercilessly turned on and hunted by members of his own species, looking to exploit his condition to their advantage. While District 9 is primarily a sci-fi movie, the implications of Vicus's fate are so horrifying that he merits inclusion on this list. Number 6. Being cloned endlessly in Moon. Sam Rockwell's existence in Moon is already a morbid state of affairs. Rockwell's protagonist Sam Bell is the sole operative of a facility on the Moon, set up to extract futuristic fuel helium-3. The only human being for hundreds of thousands of miles, Bell's sole source of companionship in this lunar purgatory is the station's artificial intelligence system, Gertie. While Sam believes he is on a 3-year contract and due to soon return to Earth, his employers, Lunar Industries, have in fact cloned the real Sam Bell hundreds of times. The versions of Bell featured within the film are merely genetic replicants of the original astronaut, brought to life for no other purpose than to provide cheap labour and save on the cost of training new astronauts. When one dies, another takes its place. Slavery where the participants are unaware of their status as slaves. In a further abhorrent twist, once they have fulfilled their use, the clones enter hibernation in preparation for their return to Earth. Lunar Industries then incinerate them in their sleep before the heinous cycle starts all over again. There isn't even a prospect of real freedom. Mirroring Bell's original contract length, the clones only have a 3-year lifespan. As such, even the version who escapes has less time remaining to him than the average house cat. Contravening every principle concerning free will that a human being has, this endless cycle of wicked exploitation arguably represents a fate far worse than death. Number 5. Elizabeth Shaw's entire storyline in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Shaw lands herself a place on this list after her entire life turns into a sci-fi horror fate worse than death. The Alien franchise reboot Prometheus sees the titular ship travel to a distant solar system in search of mankind's creators, where Noomi Rapace's character is soon revealed to be the franchise's new whipping girl. Shaw lurches from one harrowing experience to the next, any one of which would have the average person pleading to be put out of their misery. Her love interest Holloway is barbecued before her very eyes to begin with, but this is just the entree. Sleeping with the infected archaeologist the night before impregnated her with a xenomorph variant. The insidious corporation behind the expedition attempts to put her back into cryostasis so the organism can be studied on their return to Earth. While Shaw avoids the nauseating fate, the alternative is only slightly better. Elizabeth is forced to use a medical machine to remove the abhorrent fetus, all while entirely conscious. Even the Doctor's fate at the end of Prometheus is arguably far worse than death. The lone human survivor, millions of miles from home, with only murderous cyborg David for company? Shaw isn't even allowed to die peacefully. The sequel, Alien Covenant, reveals that David eventually overpowered her, using her dissected corpse in his twisted xenomorph experiments. Number 4. Turning into a fly and fused to machinery in The Fly. There's a reason that Rick and Morty dubbed humans transformed into hideously deformed monstrosities as Cronenbergs. This tongue-in-cheek tribute to director David Cronenberg is even more appropriate when one considers the fate of Jeff Goldblum's Seth Brundle in 1986's The Fly. Goldblum plays an eccentric scientist experimenting with the concept of teleportation, who accidentally becomes genetically amalgamated with a fly after it enters his teleportation pod with him. Brundle slowly transforms into the most repulsive of creatures as he steadily loses his grip on reality. The bristly hairs and the wince-worthy sores are horrifying enough, but viewers legitimately have to resist the urge to barf when Goldblum reveals his eating habits. Like a fly, the scientist now vomits a vile white liquid onto his food, pre-digesting it before he swallows it. Rather unsurprisingly, Brundle barely even resembles a human being by the film's end. Already living a fate far worse than death, Brundle's final agonizing piece of destiny comes around in the fly's climactic sequence. Attempting to fuse himself with his pregnant girlfriend in order to become the most twisted family ever conceived, the process goes disastrously wrong. Brundle melts himself with the teleportation pod instead, resulting in a monstrously deformed insect humanoid horrendously fused with scientific equipment. Goldblum's repulsive creature is left silently pleading for death in unspeakable agony. It speaks volumes that a shotgun blast to the head was a more appealing option than his current predicament. Number 3. Being trapped in the sunken place in Get Out. Individual autonomy, freedom to be our own person and make our own choices, is the driving force at the heart of what makes us human. The idea of being trapped in one's own body, utterly powerless over the decisions and actions that we and we alone were quite literally born to carry out, is a truly desolate notion, infinitely worse than death. Chillingly, this existence is precisely what awaits the victims of Get Out's insidious Armitage family. The process that the sickening clan have created essentially allows for minds to be transplanted between human subjects. The intrusive party then takes over the body of the host. Said unfortunate host's conscience is then left to rot in the dark and endless purgatory of the realm dubbed the Sunken Place. This harrowing state of affairs means that those banished to this hellish limbo can see everything in their life playing out, as if they were watching a television screen from the bottom of a swimming pool. However, they have absolutely no free will or control over their own body, doomed to scream silently in the black abyss until their mortal body finally perishes. While protagonist Chris manages to escape this hellish scenario, Get Out depicts 3 people who have undergone this nightmarish procedure, with the implication of many more. Thankfully, the film's conclusion sees the demise of hosts Georgina and Walter, death mercifully freeing their original selves from this blood-curdling fate. Number 2. Being jettisoned into deep space in life. 2017's Life is decidedly not for you if you enjoy a happy ending. The movie sees a group of astronauts aboard the International Space Station come into contact with an extraterrestrial organism from Mars. Meet Calvin. Soon revealing a predatory nature, Calvin ruthlessly wipes out the entire crew across a nail-biting 104 minutes. Only Jake Gyllenhaal's David Jordan and Rebecca Ferguson's Miranda North are left standing by the time the film's thrilling climax rolls around. Jordan attempts to lure Calvin into one of the 2 escape pods, planning to fly it into deep space to protect Earth from the murderous Martian. North, meanwhile, will pilot the other pod home, reluctantly acquiescing to his heroic sacrifice. One of the escape vehicles is shown being hit by debris on attempting re-entry, but when the dust settles, a pod has successfully landed in the sea. Against all odds, the plan appears to have worked. Not a chance. The pod is revealed to be David's, complete with his abominable passenger in tow. Unable to understand his warnings, the fishermen who discover the vehicle open it, presumably letting Calvin loose on Earth as the film ends. Meanwhile, the other pod plummets uncontrollably into deep space as Miranda screams in despair. Utterly alone in the endless darkness millions of miles from home, her only way out is starvation or suffocation. Ryan Reynolds may have died horribly, but at least he died quickly. Number 1. Killing your own son in the mist. What's that old saying about hindsight? Adapting Stephen King's novel for the big screen, The Mist's plot sees the titular paranormal weather envelop Bridgeton, Maine. The Mist comes complete with supernatural occurrences and hellish creatures. Thomas Jane's David Drayton finds himself barricaded in a supermarket with his young son Billy, along with several other survivors as a result. The Mist descends into usual tropes of apocalyptic fashion, complete with a religious mumbo-jumbo spouting whack job, but notably manages to do so in gripping fashion. True to genre stereotypes, the film sees the initial group of survivors gradually whittled down until only David, Billy, and 3 other survivors remain. Trapped in the mist after their car runs out of gas, the group decides to commit suicide in order to spare themselves a horrific death at the hands of the monsters. David makes the heartbreaking decision to use his remaining 4 bullets, not only for them, but for Billy. The truly devastating aspect of David's fate is that he thinks he is doing the right thing by giving his son a quick death, choosing to brave the monsters instead of shooting himself. In the most sadistic of plot twists, the mist soon clears after David leaves the car, revealing soldiers wiping out the creatures. As he drops to his knees screaming in unabated horror, it is clear that any manner of horrific death would have been preferable to killing one's own son mere minutes away from safety. And that concludes our list. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.